product is more sustainable than the next brand is to some degree inhibiting us hitting our global targets, because it means that a brand has to be choosing the right one, and who knows whether you have or not, rather than taking a look at what we're actually trying to achieve as a global society. So we have 2030 targets for climate, for making sure that we don't destroy our world with surpassing 1.5 degrees in temperature change. We know that forests are 30% of the solution to that climate change initiative, and we have 8 years left in that timeline. So if every factory takes its individual initiative, let's say 4 years to do the testing, find the equity financing, and scale up, and you do that one at a time. But in our case, we need 30 million to 50 million tons of product, of next gen product on the market to displace ancient and endangered forest fiber going into textiles and packaging. We lose. We all lose. It's not just that Canopy's goals don't get met. It means that we surpass 1.5 degrees and we literally burn. So in order to actually achieve the scale of acceleration, the mindset of urgency that is more like how societies act during wartime, how you actually create a pre-competitive space where the ingenuity and the financing flow to scale up, even with imperfection, is actually necessary. The idea that the first mills are maybe not going to produce the perfect product has to actually be part of this. And what we have found is that equity financing to unlock debt financing does not flow when one customer says, I'll buy it. No factory wants to produce for just one customer. That's too vulnerable for everybody, including the investor. And so you need multiple brands to say, I will support this product. I'll bring it to market. I'm willing to pay 20% or 30% more for the first 3 years until the second, third, and fourth mill are built and economy of scale kicks in. Understanding that the first mill never produces enough and has to recuperate all the research and development costs that have gone in before the brand arrived. All right. So this is part of Canopy's work, is actually in aggregating. So we don't make any money in our work. Our payoff is when forests get saved. So what we do is go to brand partners and say, you need to have the same demand set down your supply chain as your competitor. You have to be saying exactly the same thing and be saying, by date X, we will no longer support product Y, which is negative, and we will be supporting product A, B, and C, which are the more positive alternatives. And whoever can supply that, that's where we will buy from. So by aggregating it's actually a communication set and a timeline down the supply chain. So there's hundreds and thousands of brands, but fewer producers, right? So what we do is have the brands, they're still competitors in the marketplace for their customers, but they are working in a way through the way they communicate in a pre-competitive space. Mm-hmm. On the viscose supply chain, our brand partners say, the ones who joined 7 years ago said by 2020 they would no longer be buying any product, viscose product that had that had ancient and endangered forest fiber in it. That was H&M, Marks and Spencer's, Eileen Fisher, Inditex, Zara. By 2020, all of those companies literally jettisoned suppliers they would never say it in this way, but I'm knowing what happened. We worked with their suppliers. We helped their suppliers identify the bad sources and move towards Forest Stewardship Council certified forests, out of ancient and endangered forest fiber towards next gen alternatives like Renewcell, that's building a mill in Sweden right now that's using cotton textiles. Lenzing and Birla have both launched. Lenzing's got Refibra. Birla's got the Leva Reviva, which are 30% recycled cotton textile in the MMCF on the market now. And so companies have somewhere to go to with their suppliers. So we worked through the supply chain so that the producers knew what the brands wanted, by when they wanted it, how many brands wanted it. And that helped companies like Lenzing and Birla and the Sodras of the world, the Tangshan Sanyus of the world. And so it's not just North American, not just European, it's global. And they know what the market wants. And Shein just signed on with us about 3 weeks ago. And of course, that means that the Chinese viscose producers need to look at not just what the North Americans want, but what the emerging values of their domestic fashion industry are moving towards. So that pre-competitive space helps make investment flow. And in this world, if we're going to scale up into the millions of tons of production, the brands have to be working in a pre-competitive space to really communicate very clearly, not hang back on the edges and say, we'll wait for somebody else to go first. We'll let the Stella McCartneys, who are willing, the luxury brands who are always willing to pay more, but they buy smaller volumes. We'll let them go first and test this all out. That's, do you want to see a world that burns? Or are you going to take a different mindset where we are in a very urgent, unusual space as humanity and work in a way that is unusual, that accelerates the alternatives into this world at scale, allows the financing to flow, helps de-risk. So brands, by saying, I will buy, I'm willing to pay the 10 or 20% more for X number of tons for the first 2-3 years to pull this product to market. That unlocks the investment. And on the investment side, the way that risk has conventionally been played by the investment sector, we're not there anymore. So government and policy needs to step in as well to help de-risk, take first loss capital. I think philanthropic endowments, investments, and program-related investments have to be willing to provide first loss capital into this space so that we are working in a collaborative, not just where brands take the risk, not just where entrepreneurs take the risk, but the risk is actually spread around because we're all facing the existential risks at this point.
Yeah, perfectly put, Valerie. Joey, I know you'll have thoughts about this. You've talked about the importance of collaboration, but how does it work when there's so much IP involved?
I mean, yeah, it's tricky, but I guess, to Valerie's point, when it comes to capitalism, just like it needs to go conscious now. Like conscious capitalism is the term. Unfortunately, capitalism is always going to be there, but we need to fuse that with consciousness and start removing the fear. And as Valerie just said, like it's so slow to change. And with IPs and stuff like that, it comes down to like the fear, and it's like for us, and our goal is, my goal is if Veshin goes bankrupt because every factory on the planet copied my business model, that's mission complete. I'll go and do something else because I know what I'm doing is correct. And I feel like we need to start shifting that mindset to not worry about others. And some of the things that I see just in our space, and Elaine touched on it yesterday in the presentation, like we're in a sector, we're in a pie right now, which is tiny. And we shouldn't be competing with each other in this pie. Like the pie is so big for everyone to get into. I understand if you got a winning ticket and a winning solution, you've got to be protective. But at the same time, it's like we want to empower others to do the same thing. And then as Valerie said, I could listen to Valerie all day, but we need to have not just one supplier doing it. We need 100 to accelerate this growth. But at the same time, we need to make sure that this time around it doesn't fall out of balance again. We need to have that shift, and we need to have that balance. And this is why the circular economy is fundamental moving forward for business models, to make sure that we don't just go into this. Like for me, the catch-22 is owning a factory. Like we specialize in linear production. Like how can I sleep at night knowing that we can produce 100,000 bags per year, be it in mycelium? Is that sustainable for the planet? Like these are the things, and it's about consciousness and just opening up that collaboration to everyone. So it's going to get there, and it's happening right now. Like in this conference, for example, like we're seeing similar material suppliers doing similar presentations, which is amazing. I think 10 years ago, the material supplier would say, "Oh, that person's at that conference, I'm not going to be there." Like it's amazing to see back to back the suppliers doing very similar things. It's incredible.
Yeah. So just to pivot just a little bit, Sophia, what does it mean for a brand that wants to be an early adopter of a next gen material? You mentioned Hermes co-developing its own version of fine mycelium, which it calls Sylvania. So how much of the development and prototyping work should a brand expect to do when working with innovative materials?
I think that there are a range of approaches. So you have a heritage house like Hermes, which, basically owns every part of their process, right? From sourcing their materials and even developing their own materials to the fabrication and design. So they, in particular, have the capacity to work with us closely as innovation partners themselves in-house. And that's been a really rich collaboration and relationship. And there's also brands that we're working with, for instance, that are working with an entity like Veshin, right? Where they have the vision, they have the design motivation, they have the interest from their key stakeholders within the company, and they need a partner to figure out the fabrication and bring the sort of material innovation portion of the partnership. But the common theme is actually long-term commitment, and based in the shared value and vision of actually the work and the time and the data sharing and the iteration and the prototyping and the open dialogue that it's going to take to actually bring a new material into a product to market. So it really can't be a quick solution. Like nothing here is going to be a quick solution. It has to be an entirely collective and shared response and risk taking. Valerie, I loved how you said it, that we all have to share the risk and the commitment of doing this. And so, a brand that is truly committed to making a change will actually commit that time and those resources, rather than I need something right now for this season or this collection, and then I'll figure out something else for the next one, right? This is actually about long-term relationships.
Yeah. Kim, any thoughts about this?
Well, it's great, right? I mean, I think when we launched, we were first a brand, and being a startup brand, unlike Hermes or a great heritage company, you have sort of, it's tougher, right? Like your cycle's quicker. There's always an emergency. It's hard to always just be focused. You don't really have the manpower to always focus on the long goal. Right. So, which is unfortunate, in for us, when we started, it was just trying to find the best of what was available. Minimums become an issue. There's just a lot of other issues that come up on the brand side if you're not a great heritage brand, right? I mean, I always wondered in the end if I made the right decision starting as a small startup, trying to do better, or sort of not putting a product in the world until it could be great. Those are just things you often can go round and round about. But it's definitely, this is definitely something we all have to work together on for sure. And, to get better and make things more available at every level.
Wonderful. So let's take some questions. We have a question from Jacqueline Manieri. Aside from a sustainable raw material, what about incorporating chemical-free finishes? Is anyone working on PFAS, PFOS free finishes for apparel or home? Would anyone like to take this?
We're definitely looking at that. Fire retardancy is huge when it comes to the fur. That's a really big issue for us. Of course, we're looking at natural dyeing. Obviously, it's not just enough to take the petroleum-based products out of the material. It's everything about how the material's made. So we're looking into all of those things.
Great. Anyone wants to add anything else?
Well, I can share that, so our base material, of course, is entirely natural. We don't use any PUs or PVCs in our baseline material. It's mycelium. And then, of course, we're working with amazing cannery partners to develop green chemistries, finishing chemistries and finishes to deliver a finished product that meets performance standards, but that can meet, in the case that the consumer or brand is values aligned, something that is good, better for the planet. So something more green. So that is something that we are developing.
Yeah, that's great. Another question from Elaine Sue. Question for Sophia, but I'm sure everyone else has stuff to say too. What's your experience working with brands? Brands always outsource the actual production to a factory like what Joey does. How much pushback is there from these factories in using a new material that they've had no experience with? Their existing machines, techniques, their workers, craftsmen may not be able to work with the new material. Who's responsible for retraining the staff on the ground?
Well, I think so. We should let Joey speak to this definitely also. But from my view, we have had nothing but the like most strident enthusiasm in learning how to work with this material. So we work with fabrication partners and also, for our own in-house experiments so that we understand. So we have a team of product managers who understand the fabrication guides for our material so that we can go to our brand partners and their fabricators and say, like, this is how you work with this material. This is how it's like leather. This is how it's not like leather. And our brand partners, for their part, they are very excited. Their designers are so excited to be working with a new natural material that can perform like leather, but has its own unique qualities. So they're really excited to transfer their knowledge to this new material that feels like the future of materials. And then, then we also have, of course, arrangements like one that, I think Joey should speak to that, where, there are experts in fabrication who serve, basically as fabrication experts to guide this process. But I'll hand it to Joey.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the responsibility should fall on the factory owners themselves. I think what MycoWorks is doing is a great example. Like, we've started collaborating and they've educated us a lot on how to use the material, which is it's super important for us because our technicians have a very high knowledge in leather craftsmanship, and now they're just applying some of these tweaks and this education to them. But ultimately, MycoWorks can't go out to every factory on the planet and give them this crash course in education on their material. So I think the factories need to be taking the initiative, and it's a sink or swim. Right now, a lot of manufacturers don't understand this movement, don't understand, as I said, right to the beginning, traditionally manufacturers wait for the brand to come and nominate the material, then they work with it. Right now for us, we're putting in this work internally to really understand and navigate these materials. So it's definitely on the factory, because ultimately this is the shift and these are the trends. And if you want to stay in business and you want to stay like operational, you're going to have to adjust and you're going to have to adapt. And that's what we're doing. We're transitioning from leather to plant-based, and we're adapting right now. It's been difficult, but this is why the collaboration with the material supplier, back to MycoWorks, is so important, because we're getting that information now when it comes to debossing, embossing, skiving, how we can kind of do this. We can bring our knowledge, we can receive their knowledge. And then once that's ready, then we can go to the brand and say, hey, bingo, you're good to go.
Great. Kim or Valerie, anything to add?
I think they, from my point, covered it.
Yeah, great. So next question it's for Valerie from Craig Linderman.
Mm-hmm.
Valerie, I think you make a great point about aggregated demand. How do we find the balance between pre-competitive aggregation and the type of exclusive first-to-market partnerships that may be helpful in pre-scale development and justifying a cost adder for a brand?
So I'm going to just speak to the justifying the cost adder for a brand. I mean, there's depending what part of the fashion industry you're in, you have more or less capability of passing that on to the consumer. And fast fashion, which is the huge volume consumer on sector, there isn't a lot of capability or perception that there's capability to add any cost on. So it's we've found that within brands, even if there was the in one part of the company of a brand willingness to add a small amount, that the purchasers within the brand are told to go out and find, negotiate down to the lowest possible cost of the textile that they buy, and like very aggressively negotiate the cost down on materials. So the first thing is to have a company-wide, brand-wide direction about what you actually want in the textile that you're getting and what you're willing to do, because it's very different throughout the different departments of the brand. And my realization at one point is that cost that nobody wants to pay, it's not actually whether you add costs, it's whether you're willing to pay more than your competitor, because the price of these materials go up and down by hundreds of dollars sometimes per ton. And everybody just pays it. I mean, if it goes up $100 a ton, you just pay it. And that's what everybody's doing, is paying $100 more per ton. But then brands will say, we won't pay a penny more. Well, they won't pay a penny more than their competitors. And so we actually have to take account from the brand side on what it means to pay more. If in a pre-competitive, and this is where it's illegal to actually price fix. But I think this is more it's a values, a cultural approach within brands about paying the cost and realizing that usually it's about 2%, like cotton or man-made cellulosics are about 2% of the cost. The textile itself is 2% the cost of the t-shirt. Most of the cost is in every other part of the supply chain, the garment sewing, the designing, etc. So if it goes up by 20%, what are you actually paying? And will your customer pay that extra 20% if you pass that down? Do you need to? So that's one thing which I think is a reset on a mindset, and how much we're offloading costs onto the environment right now. It's just insane. We're not actually paying the full cost of the materials. So the other question was about competitive versus the pre-competitive. I think I'm going to answer this from the investment side. I think it's time for brands to start investing in what they want to see in the world and not leaving it only to like venture capital. So being an off-taker and being an investor, I think, has to become part of the urgency. And in this way, brands, I think, can be co-investors, if I can say. So pick your winning company if you want to, back a winning company, but collaborate with other kinds of funds that are going to be investing across a number of technologies and entrepreneurs, and then co-invest on the one that you think you want to back and get, be the one that's backing your winning horse, if that's what you want to do. But not everybody wants to take that risk. A lot of brands just buy what's on the market, and what should be on the market is the higher volumes of the better materials, so that the economy of scale brings the price down.
Yeah, absolutely. I know cost is top of mind for any company. Does anyone else want to talk about cost?
Yeah, just quickly. I mean, the system's been broken the last 20, 30 years, and the price point of product is just way too low. And people say these materials are costing too much. They're not. I mean, these materials, the innovation going into them is reflective of that price point. And we need to start seeing brands and the consumer paying for better product, buying less product, buying long-lasting product, and putting that money in. Because if you're buying 4 to 5 bags, 4 to 5 shirts every year, just buy one bag, buy one quality bag, and pay that price point. That's just a mindset shift. So we need to start changing that, and cost needs to stay high. Manufacturing labor costs in China now are extremely high. People don't understand that. Our staff get paid above average wage in China, and the consumer needs to start understanding this. And then in the product, and wholesalers are the ones that make it very, very difficult. That whole cost attitude needs to change, and we need to kind of change this together.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Shipping also, when you get something like crazy, like what happened with COVID and how that affected shipping costs and the supply chain. I mean, it's unbelievable when something happens like that. I mean, was detrimental to us, as a brand, how to figure out how to not pass those costs on to the customer, or how to do it fairly and still keep a margin, and those are just crazy, crazy costs.
Yeah. So a question from Hannah, jurist, for Joey. Do you have material scientists in your factory to help continue innovation and collaboration?
Not right now. I mean, my partner's backgrounds, one's from a master's in Marangoni in handbag design. My other partner is a specialist in R&D himself, so we don't have an official scientist, but just a lot of knowledge and expertise, me being a designer as well. But moving forward, one of our goals in the next 5 years is to start up an R&D innovation center in China. So really what this is taking away the high volume MOQs and really partnering with the material suppliers like we are right now at this very early beginning from a handbag and accessory perspective, so we can see the material and then we can work through the kind of the problems at the early stages. So it's in our plans to start up the R&D facility.
So we have 2 minutes left, so I think we have time for just one more question from Thomasine Dolan. It's for Valerie. Do you think brands will start making less? I worry when I hear about brands like Shein and Inditex getting involved with Canopy suppliers. When are renewable sources no longer renewable?
It's a fabulous question. So we actually have a number of our brand partners, some of the big players, are looking at business models shifts where they will be utilizing 50% less raw material inputs into all of their products over the next 8 years. That's one of the kinds of trends which is driving next gen production of various sorts in the circular economy, and even business models where you'll see it in Nordstrom's and a number of large companies that are starting to shift towards secondhand, so capturing their previous products and reselling them, repair in store to make products last longer and capturing that value. So where the business models actually allow for continued revenue, but less actual material being used. And that's definitely the rental economy. Those kinds of business models are being very seriously, not only thought about, but starting to be implemented. And I believe we'll see those accelerated over the next few years.
Well, thanks so much, everyone. I'm sure we can continue this conversation for hours, but we unfortunately have to end. So thank you once again to my panelists, and
Thank you.
Back to you, Nicole.
Great. Thank you all so much. It's making me wonder what MII can do to help solve these issues. So I will be reaching out to see if there's anything we can do to help with this collaboration post-conference. So right now we are going to have to take our 30 seconds for our on-demand viewers, but we will be back very shortly.